In the Caribbean, you're quite right. We are seeing quite a lot of inconsistency when it comes to taxation, particularly aimed at mobile operators. Now, a number of economists have some of them, like McKinsey, have spoken about the fact that if you get a 10% increase in mobile penetration, particularly in a developing country, then you will see perhaps a 1.2% increase in your GDP. So a lot of economists have actually proven those figures, but yet we're seeing some governments in the Caribbean actually increasing their taxation. We've looked at some 23, 24 markets, and Anguilla, 1st of November, they've actually put up their telecoms tax by 7%, and this will affect ordinary customers. Ordinary customers buying a prepaid card will have to pay 7% more. And we find it's only the telecoms side that's been targeted. And this seems quite strange. In fact, it's telecoms that's helping to drive the economy in a lot of our developing markets. Recently, we've seen other markets. We know that Turks and Caicos, for example, has a very high special tax, a special tax where they charge 7% on gross revenue on telecom operators. Belize is a classic example where purely the telecoms has been targeted. 24.5% taxation is charged just on telecom. Other industries like electricity and whatever are not charged that amount. So, I think that there's an alarming trend that we're seeing. I think we can understand in a recession that governments are looking to raise funds. It's understandable. And by no way are we saying that telecoms shouldn't pay any tax. Of course, they should contribute, normal corporation tax. But the fact is, governments now seem to be looking at special taxes and purely on telecoms. Interestingly enough, there's been in the Caribbean, the Caribbean Telecoms Union, a government body, actually said that the taxation are too high in the region. And I think that's, for a government body to actually say that, rather than just an operator, shows that there is a concern, because the Caribbean Telecoms Union, the CTU, recognise the contribution that mobile operators in particular make to the economy. And after all, we're talking about, there's always talk about the digital divide. Let's improve the digital divide. So if we increase taxes on mobile operators, that gives access to the poor in our society, you have to ask the question, are we actually increasing the digital divide? We might be making it worse. So yes, we need to raise revenues, but I think we need to look, when governments are making decisions, just think about possibly, is this the best thing in terms of my country's development? No, I know what you're saying, and actually, you're trying to be fair and look at, governments do need to raise taxes, and I want to be absolutely clear, you want mobile operators, telecom operators to pay their taxes. The distinction being is that there is this trend now to some special additional tax. That's what we're concerned with. And I think, governments really have to be creative. But I think you've got to look at the long term. It's not just the mobile operators that are saying that this is going to cause a problem. I was listening to the ITU Secretary General, Hamadan Toure. He has quite clearly said that you need to optimize your taxation, particularly on mobile operators, because of the fact they do so much for increasing the economy. We're all coming out of a recession here, and what do we need? We need you need the mobile operators basically to help to drive the country, develop the country. And I think, we need to just think about that for a while when we're looking at the taxation issue. It's sometimes a very emotive subject, but I think we need to think about, in the Caribbean, we need to think about the poor in our society, that we don't disconnect them. We're doing our best. If we've got amazing penetration rates, largely because of the mobile technology that's taken off. In fact, a lot of the countries have 130%, penetration. It's absolutely fantastic, and we've heard about that at this conference. But we don't want to stifle that growth. We want that growth to continue such that everybody in our society gets access to communication, to ICTs. That's what we want to see. Well, I certainly hope it is temporary. I certainly hope, but we're not getting that indication right now. To be honest, I think once a tax is there, it tends to stay there for some time. That's what I've seen in the Caribbean. Because we're in 23 markets, we're beginning to pick up these alarm bells, and we've seen, I've heard also that St. Kitts may have risen their taxes recently for mobiles. So I think that's what's really the concern. It's really, do people realize the impact of what they're doing? And I think in the Caribbean, once a tax is there, it tends to stay there. So this is what I think. I think we need to be a bit more creative and just think about, do we really want to tax? It's really something I've often spoken about is the goose that lays the golden egg. Do you really want to tax the goose that lays the golden egg? It's after all helping to develop our society. I think the solution really is that you have to think long term. Often coming out of or you're in a recession, you're thinking of kind of short-term gains really. But it goes against all the global, what the economists are talking about. Deloitte have shown in many studies, particularly for developing countries, once you start to tax SIM cards or handsets, it's going to damage you in the long term. You've got to think long term. There's got to be long-term solutions. I'm not an economist, so I can't perhaps give you any good examples. But there are, I would just say to governments and regulators that I would suggest, in my humble opinion, you think about long-term solutions rather than short-term gains, because it could hurt a very, small economies, and that's what we're talking about in the Caribbean, basically.